Hello everyone, I am Too Nutty. I am the leaderboard grinder for the game known as Scavengers. I've noticed during the first couple days of my streaming of this game that a lot of people tend to be confused about the research within the game. It's definitely one of the most complex problems within the game, but before we delve straight into that problem, I just want to talk to you guys a little bit about the game. In case you didn't know, Scavengers is a 3v3 Battle Royale-esque type of game mixed with a lot of PvE, or player versus entity. You fight computers and stuff to be able to please the so-called mother by getting data points and extracting from the game. There's a couple different strategies, and if you want to see more about the game, please feel free to check out the Twitch channel. We're trying to stream daily, especially doing a lot of 24-hour grinds to be able to keep up on the leaderboards because they are on 72-hour rolling windows. But let's get a little bit more into depth about the game. Also, I wanted to touch on the fact that the game tomorrow, according to research, according to Scavengers' Twitter page, is going to be free to play completely. They've had a lot of issues when it came to the drop, so I assume that informed their decision to just go ahead and make it free to play. I would strongly recommend that if you're looking for a new and fresh game, check out Scavengers. You will not regret it. Definitely make sure to stop within the Discord if you're looking for friends and buddies. But for now, let's go right into it. Let's talk a little bit about research overall. Let's just do a super basic guide. What is the research station? The research station is what you use to craft recipes within the game, along with being able to do things like upgrade your characters with talents. How do you do that exactly? Well, you have to use the research station by gaining salvage within the game. You gain salvage by simply killing and doing specific objectives and taking that salvage and extracting in the same game. You then take that piece of salvage, deconstruct it for resources, then use those resources plus power to be able to upgrade your weapons. Let me show you a little bit around to be able to get an understanding of where you are. First, within the salvage area. This is what your salvage area looks like. It shows you how many pieces of salvage you have, what you're specifically opening at that specific time, and the deconstruct. I just want to note here, you cannot change the order in which you open it. It's unfortunate, but you can't. I'll touch on this a little bit later as to why that's important and why I hope that changes, but overall, you can't open it. This is what deconstructing a salvage looks like. You simply click the deconstruct button and it shows you the materials that you gain. As you can see, I gained 3 copper, 2 glass, an iron alloy, some nanites, along with a braided cord that's specifically uncommon. That's really nice. This was a decent pull, but the Outlander Horde is typically very common type of salvage, so it's very you don't want to gain it a lot. You want to try to diversify what salvage you're specifically getting. Then we go to the resources tab. This is what your resources tab looks like. If you're new to the game, these 2 rows will actually be locked, along with these 2 rows right here. The reason why the game does this is because it wants you to level up your research station before you can get the material to research the higher end projects. So, take your time opening up salvage, and I'll dive into this a little bit later. But overall, you can then see what materials and components you have for your actual projects. So I will show you one project that I'm currently working on. It is the War Song. The War Song is a blue AR that is a burst rifle, similar to an M16 in the majority of games. How you can tell how to specifically craft this weapon is relatively simple. You simply look at the requirements right here. You need 180 power, steel, specifically 3 of them, a moldable polymer, and 3 explosive. After that, you start the time, which is 6 hours. It also fills up one of your slots. Now, I am specifically on tier 3 research, which means that I can have 3 different tiers to be, or 3 different slots to be able to work with. So, when I research this, I can still simultaneously start to work on, say, doing something like the cryonade, which again is over here in terms of explanation. Now, you can look around to get an idea of what you specifically want to do. But if you can see, some things you can actually access without having certain prerequisites. Things like talents require you to go down the line completely. On Valora, for example, that is typically who I was playing during my leaderboard grinds early on, I specifically researched 2 of her talents, and now I can access a third. But as you can see on the other 2 talents, I cannot actually move on to the third. You can, however, I know it doesn't show right here, but you can see what that specific perk does. Let me show you. You simply click on the Explorers tab, click on the character you want to be able to look into, and then click on her talents. After you do that, you can see and hover over what specifically is there. Now, the Tier 4 research upgrade, as you can see, blocks you from being able to see what's further on. I would strongly recommend, since I will likely get Tier 4 research today, that if you'd like to be able to take a look at some of the more advanced perks to get an idea of what you should start to pre-level prior to hitting Tier 4 research, please let me know. As well as checking out the Scavengers wiki, which is a very useful resource that also helped inform this specific video. Now, continuing on. So now you know research. You know a basic guide to how research works. What specifically do you do? Well, like we said, you need to gain salvage. You gain salvage, again, by completing a certain amount of objectives, also by killing specific things. So, what salvage is there? What am I looking for? All right. Well, first, you want a direction. You don't just want to say, oh, well, I have enough circuitry, polymer, crystallized hydrates, and phosphate. I'm just going to go ahead and craft the cryonade. Well, if you have enough, maybe you want to do that. But if you start to prioritize things, you can get better early on. For example, I don't think that these 2 grenades are worth it, especially since they take a lot of scrap inside of the game. So what did I decide to do? Focus on the signature weapons, because those are the default guns that you're able to manufacture inside of the game, along with focusing on the wildcard weapons, because being able to have excellent secondaries is very important and vital to the game. So I focused on these 2 weapons before, even though, as you can see from the throwables, I'm actually relatively close to being able to manufacture either of these 2. Simply focusing on other things allowed me to be able to get access to those to the more important items first, and then afterwards I'll start to focus on the other stuff. Now, why do you want to manufacture recipes you're probably not going to use? It's simple. The tier research or the tiers to the researches. So when you start the game, you'll start at tier research level 1. All you will have access to is the sidekick, snowpiercer, the frag grenade, and then the thermal boost. That's all. It will say, and hovering over tier 2 research, that it will say something along the lines of complete 4 research projects. You need to complete a certain amount of research projects to be able to have access to the next tier upgrade. So what do you need to do? Complete the miscellaneous stuff that you might not typically use. So when I'm done with the microburst, I don't really have another weapon or another talent or anything that I really want to craft. So I'm simply probably going to go down the line, or even possibly just focus on talents, because I still don't know what's down here in the tier 4 research. So beginning a preemptive start might be helpful in being able to get these early on. Now that you're getting an idea of how to be able to form, well, how do I know what I need, right? Like, okay, well, if I want to get the Snowpiercer, I need copper, iron alloy, and plant fibers. Is that just available in any salvage? Does salvage matter, right? Does it matter if I get a flash frozen carcass versus a scourge biomass? It does, and it's extremely important to note this. If you hover over, say, the iron alloy that we were talking about, you can see that it's a common material that can be salvaged from industrial byproduct. From Outlander Horde. This is important to know. The reason why is because if you need iron alloy and you're struggling to find iron alloy, then you should probably be picking up Outlander Hordes rather than a flash frozen carcass. This is to help you start to proceed on being able to manufacture and craft specific items early on. Now, let's say that, for example, like me, I'm really struggling with finding pre-apocalyptic caches. Well, what should I do? The great thing about this game is that it actually allows you to deconstruct certain items. As you can see, I just deconstructed some glass for 10 nanites to be able to start to craft other things. As you can see, it takes 800 nanites to be able to craft this specific material. It is based on tiers. So the blue tier, as you can see right here, is all 800. The green tier is 400, some of them being 800. And then the white tiers are all 100. If you decide that you don't need maybe 65 iron alloy because that's way too much, then you can start to deconstruct a portion of it so that way you can start to craft something like petroleum. But to be able to prevent wasting resources, definitely try to get an idea of what you specifically need. Now, what do you specifically need? I will talk about the tips further on, but overall, start to get a feel for the game. If you tune into the stream, I can definitely help you out to get an idea, but it's all based around your playstyle. If you, for example, are going to be playing somebody like Jay requires a tier 4 research prior to being able to upgrade his secondary or his a signature weapon, which means you might want to focus on other things, such as maybe the biofoam and some other wildcard weapons. Overall, get a feel for all the weapons and items inside of the game and decide your own path. That's going to be the most helpful. Again, use the Scavengers wiki if you're trying to or if you're having a hard problem trying to find some things. Now, I am going to touch on where you can find some of the salvage. To begin with, the flash frozen carcass can be found but typically near a dead sort of cow bear looking thing that has like a sort of gunky mist rising from it. If you approach that, typically what happens is scourge appear. If you kill them, typically a rabbit starts jumping all the way around. About 50% of the time you get to, or once you kill that rabbit, a flash frozen carcass will be able to appear. Next is the Scourge biomass. This is relatively straightforward. Virtually any Scourge that you kill has the chance of dropping a Scourge biomass, with some higher end Scourge being able to have a higher chance of being able to drop it. In case you didn't know, the Scourge is the zombie-like characters inside of the games, while on the other hand, the raider-looking people are known as Outlanders. Next is crystalline formation. Apologies, but nobody currently knows how exactly to be able to find this specific thing. It just sort of randomly appears. So just keep an eye out and hopefully you can find it. The Outlander Horde is also relatively simple compared to the Scourge biomass. Simply killing bigger raiders or outlanders inside of the game increase the chance of dropping an Outlander Horde. I would specifically recommend targeting the Overseer inside the majority of the objectives, and that will almost definitely drop an Outlander Horde. If you're still struggling with this, killing the purple bosses that drop 50 total data points is also a really good effective strategy. Next is on to orbital debris. Orbital debris is comes from exactly where it sounds, the orbital drop. That is the 75 point drop that happens during the Cat 4 storm that you can go to and collect not only 75 points and materials, but also the orbital debris. After that, we have the Scourge Seed. The Scourge Seed actually drops from the Sluka. The Sluka is the 100 point boss that spawns in the Cat 4 storm as well. A very, very giant Scourge. If you kill it, it should drop a Scourge Seed that you can be able to take out of the game. Do be careful though, Sluka is the highest point enemy inside of the game, and on top of that, it takes a very long time to be able to kill. Keep an active eye on your radar prior to attacking this, because if you don't, you risk the chance of getting snuck up on. Industrial byproduct is also one of the items that a lot of people don't necessarily understand where it comes from. The best thing that I can recommend is just keep an eye out for the industrial byproduct. The industrial byproduct, in my personal opinion, is the rarest and most valuable piece of salvage. Now, of course, if you're somehow finding 50 industrial pieces or byproducts salvage, you probably don't need to keep focusing on that. But if you can find it early on, I'd strongly recommend it. Next, we go on to pre-apocalyptic caches. Pre-apocalyptic caches fall into pre-apocalyptic supply drops. Those supply drops can be found during the Cat 2 storm, in the middle of Cat 2 and Cat 3 storms, and typically requires 600 scrap to be able to open. Not only do you get a valuable piece of salvage, you get extremely good weapons, including gold, purple, and blue tiers that aren't frequently found within the Outlands. Please make sure that you're hitting these as much as you can, as they are very valuable. I'm so sorry, guys. I forgot to turn off my alert box. PokeTKB, I appreciate the follow. I'm assuming you're probably coming for the leaderboards. It's very appreciative. And then the very final piece of salvage that's inside the game is secured assets. Secured assets can also be found within the supply drop and is extremely valuable. Now, again, if you're trying to figure out what you're specifically looking for, simply hover over a piece of material that you're specifically looking for, and it will show you what it is. Components can also be found at a much less or a less frequent rate inside of these. As you can see, I can find the lens inside of a pre-apocalyptic cache. There is one caveat to this. Some materials and some components inside the game have to be crafted. Specifically, the biggest problem in terms of upgrading becomes the bionic augmentation. This bionic augmentation is required for every single talent crafted inside of the game. If, for example, you're wanting to completely level up a specific individual, it takes 12 bionic arm to be able to craft. As you can see, at 3 hours apiece, along with some very rare materials, it can take a very long while to be able to craft talents. Makes it extremely important to be able to find these materials inside of the game to prevent having to waste other materials to be able to craft them. Again, that's collagen, copper, iron alloy, and meteoric alloy. Obviously, as you can see, collagen and meteoric alloy are much more rare than something like copper and iron alloy. Keep an eye out for these types of things. You can also see that something like the moldable polymer is extremely rare because, again, it comes inside of that industrial byproduct, but is required for almost any weapon that you actually craft, including both wildcards and signature weapons. Steel is another industrial byproduct, salvage, but it again is needed inside of the majority of the weapons that you craft, meaning it is very valuable but takes extremely rare resources. These types of things you want to get a heads up on. I apologize. Let me try and mute that. Again, I appreciate the follow, MK the dinosaur. Now moving on just a little bit, we are going to talk about the specific projects. Now, what are projects? Projects are simply the recipes that you're crafting. I know, it's kind of weird. They should just call it recipes to be able to make things much simpler, because that's all they really are, is an understanding of what you're crafting inside of the game. When you begin, as I've already talked about, you get Sidekick, the Snowpiercer, the Grenade, and then the Thermal Boost. You immediately get to work on these types of things, especially the Thermal Boost. It is required virtually at all parts inside of the game and simply costs a mere 100 scrap to be able to craft. I have lost plenty of games due to the cold inside of the game and not being able to find a fire. Being able to craft these is valuable and needs to be on every character inside of the game. Please research this after your very first game. This will allow you to get a heads up on anybody else who is in the same skill field as you. Taking another tour, as you can see, each character has weapons to be able to unlock. If you don't have characters unlocked, which would be Callie, Jay, Letty, or Cruz, then you can't actually upgrade their weapons. So keep this in mind, that maybe if you're planning on unlocking, say, Jay, even though you didn't craft him at the very beginning, if you're planning on unlocking him later, maybe you want to start to get some of the parts to be able to manufacture that. You could not only look that up online, but it'd also be able to help to look at some of similar items. For example, steel, copper, and resin is a pretty common part inside of the game. As you can see, more steel, more resin, more steel, and this time phosphate, and then again those moldable polymers. So maybe crafting some moldable polymers and steel in advance might be able to be the move for you, depending on what your specific plans are within the game. Wildcard weapons are secondary weapons that you can be able to craft inside the game. Some characters only have one strength when it comes to their common kit. For example, Valora has a really solid shotgun, but that's it. It's just a shotgun. That makes her extremely ineffective at long ranges and typically requires on-ground loot inside of the game. That typically, especially for me early on, was a common green AR known as the Rattler. It is not very good. It has 15 rounds and might be able to break a purple shield with a full clip. Instead, now I have the Argonaut, which is significantly better in terms of damage, ammo capacity, and accuracy. Being able to craft these weapons the second you get into Tier 3 research is very important. The Argonaut and the Warsong are very similar in terms of capability. Then, of course, the Microburst is a Glock that's meant to fight at close ranges. Moving on to throwables, these are simply your grenades. They're pretty straightforward. A frag grenade, a proximity mine, a bouncing grenade, and then a cryo-nade. Simply pick whichever is your favorite and start crafting it. Keep in mind that the higher the tier of the actual recipe means the more that the the more scrap that you need inside of the game. Meaning that as much as I might prefer bouncing blasters to frag grenades, I typically keep frag grenades because bouncing blasters take almost 3 times as much scrap. Therefore, having a frag grenade is significantly better for me early on. Then going on to items, almost every single item inside of here is extremely important. Again, the thermal boost is a must. You have to have the thermal boost on every single character. It is non-negotiable. I'm telling you that anyone who tells you otherwise is cheating themselves. Even if you could share with your teammates, which would require you to be running together, which is not an effective strategy, you still would run into consistent issues in terms of cold, in terms of losing permanent health and having to use up heals or even abilities prematurely. As well as the ammo crate and biofoam are extremely useful as well. The ammo crate is good early on, while the biofoam is good for late game. The tier 4 research, I just know this because I played in the closed beta, is a stim. A stim is very valuable, especially if you're trying to run away or catch up to somebody. It does exactly what it says on the tin, which is being able to move faster and reload faster. Finally, we have the talents. Talents are perks inside of the game. This is a very unique game in terms of allowing you to customize your kit with that much capability. Now, again, we don't know what's behind tier 4 research upgrade. However, we can get a pretty good idea of what's going on. As you can see, you can get things like making your character be able to be invisible while rolling. This is very valuable as you're able to really confuse, especially players that are newer to the game, about where the heck you went in the 1 second that you decided to roll. Keep an idea of what perks that you want pretty early on. Some are extremely valuable. I know it doesn't show right here, but this little perk right here actually gives you decreased damage to your shield, which is 90% of the fight that you're going to be fighting in the first place. Meaning, we don't know the specific numbers, but if you're able to decrease damage by even 5%, you're talking the difference between getting 3 pumped by a Valora's shotgun or getting 2 pumped. The split, or the 1.5 to 2 seconds that you gain through something like this is very valuable. Please make sure to get an idea of what perks are available and to early on get an idea of what to go for, because again, the bionic augmentations are very valuable, and as you can see, it takes 6 hours to be able to craft these things. That means that if you're a casual player who can't get on all the time, you're looking at only being able to craft one of these at max a day. Please get an idea of what you're going to move on to in the future. That is almost the entirety of the guide. It is relatively straightforward and a little bit more complex in its own way. While it's relatively easy to understand, if you don't come from games that are like this, say for example, all you do is play BRs like PUBG and Apex and have no grasp to customization, or if you're just a Skyrim god who customization is your thing and you're getting a grasp on this, I hope that this video helps. I want to finish up by giving you some of Nutty's tips and to get an idea of what happens and to help you guys learn from my mistakes. So, what are Nutty's tips? To begin with, don't just open up your salvage. If you just open up your salvage, you limit the amount of resources that you can get. Remember that there are tier 4 and tier 2 all the way to tier 5 research upgrades that are required to access certain materials and components. Those materials and components need to be used whenever you get the tier research done. What does that mean? Well, let's say right now I am crafting currently the tier 4 research upgrade, and the first thing I want to do is get Jay's tier 4 research upgrade. Well, that's an issue if I don't have any salvage. That's because I guarantee that when I get the tier 4 research upgrade and I start trying to craft this, I'm going to need tier 4 materials and components. But you can't get those if you're not tier 4 when you open up the salvage. If you're tier 3, open all of your salvage, you're not going to have any for tier 4. Waiting to open any salvage until you need it is going to help you be able to get an early advantage in the games, and again, not use up your or deconstruct your materials to be able to focus on other materials. You are wasting a significant amount of materials if you go ahead and proceed with this strategy. Holding on to your salvage will allow you to get an early head start whenever you hit tier 2, tier 3, tier 4, or even tier 5 research. Hold on to it. You don't know what you're going to need and what you're not going to need. Even if you preemptively search it, you don't know what, again, you can't pick what specific salvage you're opening, so you can't get a head start on that. Please take your time and don't just spam open your salvage. Hold on to it until you need it. Next, well, there's like 100 different recipes, Nutty. What am I supposed to craft? Not only can you come to the stream and ask me personally, but you can also just get a sense of it yourself. If, for example, you want to play a single character, I don't recommend this, and I'll talk about this in a second, but if you just want to play, for example, Halden, and all you want to do is focus on his stuff, then focus on his stuff. Get the strike rifle at a blue tier. This thing is gross and disgusting and needs a nerf, but until then, abuse the crap out of it. It is a very strong signature weapon that only costs 100 extra craft inside of the game. It is crazy nuts, but can help you get an advantage over the other teams. Again, if you're just focusing on playing a character, getting their signature weapon is extremely important. The only character that can't be researched at tier 3 is going to be Jay's. I cannot wait to see what the tier 4 research is right here, and Jay's likely going to be the next character I purchase. Wildcard weapons. These are virtually all useless. I had the Opus and the Quicksilver developed by the beginning of my second stream. I didn't craft it once inside of probably 30 games. It's just not worth it. They're not very good, and scrap is very valuable inside of the game. Now, every single game, I'm virtually building the Argonaut, and I'm going to guess I'm going to probably be building the Microburst as well. Getting an idea of what to specifically research at this tier is very important. Again, if you don't follow my instructions on holding onto your materials, if you have industrial byproduct and you waste that on tier 2 rather than holding onto it for tier 3, then you're going to have to craft these yourselves, which again take a lot of materials and a lot of time. Getting preemptively holding on to these material or holding on to industrial byproduct to be able to open later on is a very great strategy. In terms of throwables, like I said earlier, it's dealer's choice. If you like cryonades, go with cryonades. If you like frag grenades, go with frag grenades. Currently, utility inside of this game is not very valuable. I probably almost never knocked anybody with nades, not only because the range is extremely short, but doing something like using the cryo or the bouncing blaster is too unpredictable. Proximity mines are pretty valuable, but are pretty predictable as well. People don't typically just W key into something like the dropship. Instead, they try to poke their toe or tippy toe around it until they start setting things off. Specifically, stun traps by Tariq are very predictable on the dropship. Combine this with a proximity mine, and you're simply wasting the throwable slot. Get an idea for what's the best for you personally. Lastly is the talents. We've already talked about this, but again, it is very important because on some characters like Cruz, getting a head start is very valuable. If you want to take reduced damage, then simply focus on getting this defensive slot up. Build a bionic augmentation. Make sure you have musk glands and immediately start researching this. 6 hours is a long time, and while you're at it, you have two other perk slots two other research tiers that can start to be worked on. That basically concludes I have one more part to cover, which is power. Power is basically the limit to the research that you can do. Think of it like a mobile game when the mobile game tells you you have to wait 6 hours to get enough to be able to play a game or whatever. I don't really like the mechanic, but it is a mechanic nonetheless. How do you get more power? As you can see, it says level up to increase. Well, Nutty, how do I upgrade? I'm glad you asked. Diversifying the characters that you're playing. Don't be Nutty who has like 50 hours into the game already and is only level 38. There are people with the same amount of time played and even far less of time played who are like level 60. Well, how does that work? It's because your account level is tied to your explorer level. I specifically only played Valora. I should say that the higher the level on a explorer you are, the more XP or the more time it takes to be able to level them up. I mainly played Valora. I'm level 21. I probably played Valora probably 75% of the time. Yet it only makes up probably or a little over 50% of my total levels. On the other hand, Halden, Cruz, and Tariq, I played very little in comparison, and yet are contributing almost the majority of the levels to my character. Playing a variety of characters not only advantageous in terms of leveling, but also gives you a better grasp as to the strengths and weaknesses of each explorer, as well as being able to fill a good sense of what style your gameplay is in. I personally prefer close range, so Valora and Cruz are excellent options, but also being a team's player and playing Halden is very valuable as well. I'm not a good sniper because I'm a brain dead aim assister, so so I don't typically touch Tariq very often. But if either way, play a very good diversity of characters to not only level but to get a better feel for the game, getting more power and being able to get things done early on. The very last thing, I promise, the very last thing I'm going to say is chips. I apologize, I know you can't see it right here, but there is a fast track option for research using chips. Don't use it. You are wasting chips. Okay, chips are used not only to purchase skins, as you can see right here, but are also used to be able to buy explorers. I decided, because I'm like the best Valora brain dead aim assister on the planet, that I decided that I really wanted the cool skin, right? Because that does look pretty fire. So I decided to waste points on that. Well, I probably have a character right now, still, even though I spent chips on her, but I decided to rush my research. Guess what position I'm in now? I'm having to go in and break apart all of these freaking iron alloys just so that way I can get petroleum. If I had decided to be smart, wait, gain enough salvage to be able to work on these items, I wouldn't be putting myself at a disadvantage. Do not use the chips. Even if you're a better grinder than I am, and you're somehow already have all the characters, and you have the cool skin and the cool little backpack, and I don't know, you can't buy any more 3-hour XPs, and you have 500 leftover chips. Well, Nutty, shouldn't I use them? No, don't. You're putting yourself at a huge disadvantage. Hold on to it. It's not a race to the finish line. It is a marathon, not a sprint. Take it slow, get a feel for what's going on inside of the game. Early on, yes, you'll have a lot of 20-minute crafts, 10-minute crafts, 5-minute crafts, an hour craft, and you just, oh, it's only 5 chips, so why shouldn't I? Don't do it. Hold on to it. I promise you will be better off. That's going to go ahead and conclude the video. I apologize for the raw footage-esque feel to the video. I am newer to the streaming world. I only started streaming a couple days ago, and it has been a wild ride. I simply want to do my best to be able to help you guys understand Scavengers and to make the best content possible for you guys, not only by grinding and holding on to each of the top leaderboards, but also by being able to help you start to grind the leaderboards as well. Please let me know in the comments below if I messed anything up or if you have any specific questions. Feel free to tune into the stream anytime, and I'll also be able to help you there. Until then, I sure hope you have that, guys. You guys have a great day. I hope to meet you on the battlefield, and thank you so much.